Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Scares That Shaped Us, a podcast about horror writers and the stories that made them. I'm your host, Matthew Jackson. I just finished a great book, and regular listeners of the show will probably not be surprised that it's great. I just finished a novel called A Game in Yellow by friend of the show, Haley Piper. It's coming out this August. It is a erotic thriller told through the cosmic horror, weird fiction influences of Robert W. Chambers' The King in Yellow. I am still stunned by what I read. I'm a fan of Haley, as you all know. Hopefully you are too. I've thought that each of Haley's last three major novels were the best thing she's ever written, and each one gets topped by the next book. A Game in Yellow, I think, is the best thing Haley Piper's written. It's fantastic. It's out in August. Hopefully, sometime between now and then, we can have Haley on the show. A Game in Yellow is out August 12th. Y'all should head over and hit pre-order on that thing because you're going to want it. It's an early contender for my favorite horror novel of the year, so keep a lookout for that. We've got a good one for y'all today. Sam Rebelein is here. We're going to talk to Sam about his latest book, The Poorly Made and Other Things, his upcoming book, how they all fit into the same shared universe that he started with Edenville. And we're going to talk about the first video game that we have ever covered in depth on this show. It's called Nightmare Ned. If you were a Disney kid in the 90s, you might remember a little bit of it. It's a weird, wild journey, and it provoked, I think, a really fun chat between Sam and I. So let's head over right now to our interview with Sam Rebelein. Joining us this week on The Scares That Shaped Us is one of the most exciting rising stars in horror right now. You will know him from his acclaimed debut novel, Edenville. His latest release is The Poorly Made and Other Things, and it is available now wherever books are sold. Sam Rebelein, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm truly really excited to be here and excited to talk about our thing tonight.
Yes, yeah, I am too, and I'm so glad we could actually make this work. For a peek behind the curtain for listeners, I'm not 100% sure sitting here right now when this episode will go up. It'll go up relatively soon, but like Sam and I have been trying to get this thing going for a couple of months. So this is the fulfillment of a lot of emails and figuring out schedules and things. So it's good that we could make this happen. Yeah, back when I was initially putting out the ask to get you on the show, The Poorly Made had just come out. So it's been a couple months now. But for listeners who maybe still haven't picked it up and still don't know, could you give us a little taste of what The Poorly Made and Other Things is?
Sure. The Poorly Made is stories from around Renfield County, which is like a cursed, spooky Hudson Valley, upstate New York. The last 100 years, weird things have been happening all around the county. There's cannibals, weird creatures, kids go missing left and right, all kinds of weird stuff. And so The Poorly Made and Other Things is sort of a survey of that land. Lots of different perspectives from people who have succumbed to that darkness and people who are kind of fighting against it. And these stories are strung together through a series of emails that this woman is writing to her brother to try to figure out how their mother's death is maybe linked to the curse or maybe not. And she's pulling together all these pieces of the county through these emails. And so you're getting her story and a little bit of the history of the county as you're reading through these short stories. And you're seeing clues between all the stories and her emails. And, I wanted it to feel like a more cohesive kind of Castle Rock. I feel like there are a lot of Stephen King books where he just kind of is like, and over there is Derry, and I wanted it to feel more like significant than that. So that is the Poorly Made and Other Things.
So you mentioned it's Renfield County. It takes place in the same universe, the same place as Edenville did. Mm-hmm. And I'm very curious in reading this because it is a linked narrative, and you do see all of the connective tissue running through all of these stories. But the stories vary widely in terms of voice and perspective and tone. They get very dark. They also can get very funny. They talk about little children and adults and everyone in between. Did this start as you just sort of writing a series of stories and letting them go wherever they were going to go, and then the emails came, or was this all along a mission to sort of present this survey of everything Renfield County has to offer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It did begin as just a series of shorts. I was driving around the Hudson Valley a lot for work, and I was part of a playwriting group at the time that met like 45 minutes away from me. So I was driving up and down sort of the main county road, and just writing down stuff that I saw that creeped me out. Like the one of the stories that people seem to really click with is about a guy who sits by the side of the road in a bathtub, and that was just like, saw a bathtub by the side of the road, and I was like, who does that belong to? And things like that. And sort of out of convenience, the stories began to link together because I was like, well, I've got this one creepy small town. I might as well make that the same creepy small town from this other story so that I don't have to think of a whole like new creepy small town. And then I heard about the Charlie Lawson murders. I don't know how much of a true crime fan you are. I used to be a big true crime guy, and then I kind of fell out of it because more and more I was like, I don't know, these are real people. And it's just a different vibe from horror, But Charlie Lawson was a tobacco farmer in 1929, and he shotgunned his entire family for reasons that we still don't understand, which is also something that endlessly fascinates me. And part of the crux of the Renfield mythos, I guess, too, is that, what are the things that change you? What's the stuff that kind of wriggles inside and cracks you apart? And family annihilators have always fascinated me for that reason, because you're a normal family man, and then all of a sudden you're like $10,000 in debt, and you're like, well, instead of telling my family about this debt, I might as well shoot them all in the face, or whatever. And so like, that kind of switch fascinates me because I'm terrified of like if and when it might happen to me. Like, you could wake up and be different, right? So I was just fascinated by this Charlie Lawson case, and there's a weird detail about it where it was Christmas morning, and there was so much blood on the floor that it froze into these big sheets of like bloody ice. And the neighbors who were cleaning up the house sort of hacked up these sheets and buried them in the backyard. So all that is in the book, and all that is true. And then I was like, well, if that murder blood touches the soil, that's cursed soil for sure. That's nothing's going to grow there. Or if it did, how would it grow weird? So that was its own story for a while. That I was trying to tell the story about the curse spreading through the county. And it didn't really have a plot, it was just like, and now it's even creepier, the stain spreads. And so then I sort of added in this narrative. It was from the first person point of view. So I was kind of discovering it in pieces. And then it became this woman who was trying to grapple with this story about her grandmother and, I don't know, sort of generational curses, which is kind of her main question, is like, is this stuff just inside of me because that's our family, and our family has always suffered from addictive personalities and, these kinds of behaviors and things like that? Or is it the curse that's gotten inside of us all, So yeah, those were two kind of separate things. That I was working on that story over here, and then I had all my short stories that were kind of connected to certain towns over here. And then at a certain point, I don't even remember how, but they just sort of started to blend together. I was really interested in the form of short story collections. Like, how could you play with the structure of things? And I was doing a lot of sketch comedy in college too. And so I was interested in how you could play with the form of a sketch. Like, if you're putting on a show of sketches and you do one sketch early on in the show, and then later on, like, kind of surprise, bring it back. What's the way that you can kind of subvert audience expectations like that? Because I was always into like really weird sketch shows, like I Think You Should Leave, and Auntie Donna, which is kind of a lesser known one, I think. But yeah, college humor back in the day, things like that. So that sort of that interest in sketch comedy translated somehow into short horror story collections. But yeah.
So this is all, like we said, in one universe, and you brought up Castle Rock, and your next book as well is also set in Renfield County, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, I obviously, like, you're not alone in this storytelling tendency. Stephen King famously does it, and Josh Mallerman has his own creepy fictional version of Michigan that he plays with. Was it always your ambition to do this big interconnected world, or did it just sort of evolve that way when you decided for the first time, like, oh, this is going to happen in a completely fictional place? How did Renfield County, what was the birth of Renfield County like?
I remember in like 2014, this must have been around the time that I was getting really interested in the original Universal monster movies. And a friend showed me, I hadn't seen any of them, the Wolfman or Bela Lugosi's Dracula or anything. Then around Halloween time, a friend of mine showed me Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And his pitch was like, well, this was sort of their Avengers back then. The monsters all had their own movies and they kind of came together. And I was just like, wow, that is so cool, that you could have an Avengers style world, but with monsters, in some way. Monsters have always intrigued me more than superheroes. And so that was just a really interesting idea to me. And then I started watching the movies on my own, and I was really blown away by Dwight Frye's portrayal of Renfield in that original Bela Lugosi Dracula, and sort of Renfield the Renfield character in general, because he's prey to forces that he doesn't understand and never understands, and then he just dies. Like, that's what a horrible lot in life, as a character in the mythos, so I was just fascinated by that. And I think I must have had other story ideas that I was working on. And then at a certain point, and this is the clear memory that I have, where I was like imagining the movie trailer for when all three of these ideas come together and it's like this big thing. And that was going to be like my Avengers, this is going to be like the big one. So that idea has always kind of been there, that like there are all these separate pieces, and then at a certain point they start to coalesce and then build into something major. And they've started to do that a little bit with Galloway's Gospel. The big thing that I kind of imagined in that like movie trailer, that fantasy of like from the mind of Sam Rebelein, you kind of like whatever.
Yeah.
The stuff that I kind of imagined happening in that trailer is now stuff that does happen in a way in Galloway's Gospel. So I'm really excited for that one, because I feel like I really hit my stride with Renfield, and it also sets up some of the really weird, cool Renfield stuff that I've been wanting to do. Yeah, I don't know exactly how the world started, but that is the clearest, oldest memory I have of being like, I'm gonna build a world, So yeah, at least 11 years ago.
So Galloway's Gospel is out in September. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. September 16th.
And could you give us I know I'm making you do like blurbs out loud right now, but could you give us a little teaser of what you just sort of mentioned? It is sort of the next step for you in the Renfield County universe. What can readers expect from that?
I played around a lot with subgenre and different kinds of kooky things in Edenville. And I think that there were a lot of sort of seeds of the world that I was trying to set up with Edenville. So in many ways, to me, it doesn't feel like a complete novel because it's plugged into so many other things for me. Galloway's Gospel is a complete story. And it follows Rachel Durwood. So if you've read The Poorly Made and you're kind of like, oh, wow, well, what happens to her next? Galloway's Gospel, she becomes one of the, like, kind of a badass. This girl is bored in class. She's in high school history class and she's drawing monsters. And the kids around her all grew up in Renfield County. You know, she lives in the county, and they're sort of used to things. They're used to strange things happening. And so when they see these weird monsters, they can't quite clock that she just made them up, that she's just imagining stuff. So they're like, cool, where'd you see these? And because she's getting attention, she's sort of like, oh, you know, blah, 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 and sort of making up this mythos for it. And that spirals into this whole cult that starts taking over the town. Before she can be like, no, wait, I made this up, it just spirals far beyond her control. And then 10 years later, the town seems to be gearing up for its like doomsday. The cult is like, our savior is almost here. And Rachel Durwood is now, this is about a year after The Poorly Made, she has joined the Renfield County Guard, which is sort of the Men in Black-esque organization that's tasked with keeping the county safe and fighting back the night and all this stuff. And so she's going to shut that shit down. Because after the events of The Poorly Made, she has this like, if I can just save one fucking person from this county, I will have done my job. And so she goes off into this cult-ridden town to try to shut it down. And so it's two narratives. We've got one that takes place in 2009, these high schoolers who are starting this cult, and 2019 as Rachel Durwood is trying to shut it down. So it's this epic story about how, about stories in a way, about how stories go beyond us, about how stories can be used as weapons, how men can twist histories for their own means and things like that. So, you know, I think as often happens with writing, you're getting something out and you're having fun, and then all of a sudden it feels like kind of political or like, you know, important in some way, even if it's just important to you. Like Poorly Made felt that way, where I was like, this is just a fun story about a cannibal, and then all of a sudden it was about like my depression or something, you know. And so Galloway's Gospel really became that. It became this like, you know, I really had some shit to say with this one, I realized by the time I was done writing it. So it'll have many of the same elements as Edenville: strange creatures, lots of humor, all kinds of fun stuff, but it is also this like kind of an epic tragedy in a way. So that's what I'll say before I start giving shit away.
Okay. I'm very much looking forward to reading that and hopefully having you back on the show to talk about that. But yeah, you brought up I Think You Should Leave, and I've never gotten to talk to someone about I Think You Should Leave on this show before.
Oh my gosh.
Before we move to our topic that you brought, I want to ask you, is there a single favorite I Think You Should Leave sketch that is the one that lives most clearly in your head?
Oh, geez. I mean, that's such a good question. The hot dog one is a classic. Reason the hot dogs. He's like, we're all trying to find the guy who did this. I love that one. In the very first episode, there's one where the like toilet hole is too small, and so like he's like, and two plumbers come in and they dance around on the couch and they, you know, say something like it's turbo time or whatever. Like that whole bit is great. Coffin Drop is incredible. I love all the classics. Do you have a favorite one? Or
I before like a couple months ago, I would have said it was the skeleton song. Because
yeah,
I
was just
do
talking about that one with my friend. Yeah,
every like late September rolls around every year, my wife goes insane because I start just walking around going, "It was also the night that skeletons came to life." And she has never seen a second of that show, but she knows that song because I bring it up all
oh
the
my
time.
gosh,
But the one that like has really recently like stuck with me, and I think it's because it's a little horror tinged, as some of the best I think you should leave sketches are, is the Darmine Doggy Door commercial when
oh
that
yeah,
little monster thing comes through through the door, and he
yeah,
explains later that he hallucinated the monster because his neighbor put a Nixon mask on a pig and sent it
right,
into his house because he's arguing with his neighbor. And then
yeah,
it becomes this whole, you just watch a man in the midst of an existential crisis completely unravel because he's realizing, like, I had a moment where I thought that monsters were real, and it made me realize
yeah.
that I'm unsatisfied with my entire life.
I was gonna say that's the one where he's like says something like, "I just realized monsters walk the earth" or something like that,
He,
right? It's
I
like,
think what he says at the very end is like, my life is nothing I thought it would be and everything I feared because for 10 seconds I thought there was monsters on the world.
yeah. Oh my god,
And that's
incredible.
such an amazing like cosmic horror type thought to have. But anyway,
Yeah.
we could talk about I think you should leave for an hour, but we're not here to talk about I think you should leave. We are, this is exciting. I've talked before about how much I love when someone comes to this show and brings a horror thing that I not only hadn't experienced but hadn't even heard of. And you did it. We're going to talk about, this is the first video game we've ever talked about on the Scares
Oh
That
my
Shaped
gosh, you
Us.
had never even heard of this. This is crazy.
I hadn't.
Oh my god.
So we're talking about Nightmare Ned, which is a PC game that was released in 1997. There's also an accompanying animated series, but that's
Mhm.
another thing. This thing is crazy. Just one of the weirdest like artifacts of pop culture from the 90s that even as a 90s kid I didn't really know anything about. So,
Yeah.
Sam, what was your first experience of Nightmare Ned like?
I think I probably got it from the library. This was a time when, and I guess they still do, but libraries had video games that you could rent as well. And so there were a fair number of PC games that I would play incessantly for like a week and then give them back to the library. Like a lot of like uh, activity center games. A lot of like movies had tie-in games that were just like activity centers. So you could play like the Lion King Activity Center. It'd be just a bunch of like dumb mini games. um, so Nightmare Ned was one of those. It's for kids, right? And so I was playing it on my parents' big blocky desktop monitor, you know. Um, Probably like during the day, like I remember like in the afternoon, maybe after school. It's like, how old would I have been? Like 7 years old or so. Um, and just being so blown away. Like, should I say a little bit about what the game is?
Oh
Like, I
yeah,
just
yeah.
remember. Okay,
Go for it.
okay. So it's a kid. We meet Ned. He comes home from school. It's a spooky, stormy evening. His parents are away, so he has a great time. He brings out all the snacks. He's playing video games, and then all of a sudden the lights go out, and everything's freaky. And Ned's a big scaredy cat, so he runs into bed, and he enters like a nightmare world where like he's in bed and then everything gets woobly and kind of like he goes into a Dali painting, sort of like everything stretches out and then these arms burst out of the wall and drag him down into like a hell funnel, basically. You think that's a fair description? Like he goes into a whirlwind. Like
it is a nightmare vortex.
Yeah. And he's approached by like half a dozen weird demon spirits in this vortex who are all like, "I'm gonna fuck you up, Ned," but they all have like different themes. So there's like the weird bathroom ghost, there's the like graveyard reaper guy, and so they all say sort of on theme things, like, "I'm gonna flush you down, Ned," and whatever. And so then you land on a giant nightmare version of your bed, of Ned's bed, and you get to choose the different realms that you want to go to. And so there's the graveyard realm, and it's all Ned's fears, right? So it's graveyard realm, school realm, the dentist's office, the doctor's office. What am I missing? The bathroom. Ned is afraid of the bathroom. And the attic. There's like a creepy attic. I think that might be it. But so the bits that I remember really clearly are from the graveyard and the doctor's office, because it's all sort of like what you're trying to do is complete little tasks and mini games throughout these 6 worlds, so that you're turning the ghosts into regular things. So if you defeat like one thing in the school world, the school ghost gets a little bit more human. And then by the end, he's fully human. And it's revealed that this ghost was like Ned's nightmare version of his school bully. And once you fully humanize him, the bully is like, "I don't mean to make fun of you. I'm insecure too." And so like Ned is kind of overcoming his fears. But the 2 bits that really fucked me up were in the graveyard, you climb up this tree and there's a weird tree demon. And I don't remember if they show this in the playthrough that I sent you, but your task is to like, because Ned's got a yo-yo, is his weapon of choice. So you're flicking this yo-yo at people. And this weird tree ghoul has like, you can see his heart beating behind his like weird ribs.
Yeah.
Which also, like, for everyone just listening, Matthew just looked really upset for a split second, like just remembering this image. So you have to like throw your yo-yo at the ribs in order to break the creature's ribs and pop his heart. And that helps the graveyard reaper ghost become more human. You know, it's one of the things you have to do. But if you aren't fast enough or you miss or whatever, the tree ghoul has these sharp fingers, and he will poke one of his long, sharp fingers through Ned's ear and poke his brain out the other ear.
Mm-hmm.
And as a 7-year-old, oh my God. And similarly, in the doctor's office, there's one mini game where you are strapped to a gurney and you're flying down a hallway, and these doctors are leaning out of doorways in the hall and like swiping at you. And you have to dodge them. And if you don't dodge them, then they grab one of your organs from your body. And at the end of the level, you're strapped to this like thing that you have to spin, and you have to land on the jar with your organ in it. And then a weird beaver creature will hop up and take the organ out of the jar and stuff it back in Ned's body. None of this is like hyperbole or like,
no, not at all. No, like this again, this is not only a game that was made for children. This was released by Disney Interactive.
Disney, yeah.
It was accompanied by an animated series that was also produced by Disney that only aired like 12 episodes or something like that. It wasn't a hit or anything, but they were developed.
Neither was the game.
Neither of them made like a huge impact, and as a result, they are these kind of like pop culture artifacts. But it is gloriously macabre. Like it's so over the top in like if you ever watched something like Real Monsters as a kid.
Oh, sure.
And you got that sort of sense of humor about like, we're just going to be as gross as possible because it's about monsters. The thing that first you mentioned me looking a little upset when I remembered the heart in the rib cage, and that's definitely upsetting. And I mean, like, to be clear, like, listeners, if you've never seen any of this, first of all, there are playthroughs on YouTube you can go look at.
It's like an hour and a half. Like old school video games were short, man.
Oh yeah.
So some were pretty long, but like you could blow through a lot of them in like 90 minutes. Look at
yeah. It's got this very sort of charming, almost Tim Burton-y Beetlejuice the animated series style animation when it comes to all these creatures and stuff, but they do not skimp on like the violence that Ned endures. In the playthrough that I watched last night, the first place he goes is the graveyard, and there's a bit early on when because there are all of these sort of zombified humans in the graveyard, and he has to avoid them. There's a woman holding a cat, and the cat reaches out and bites him on the head and literally takes half his head off.
Oh yes, that's right.
Like,
yeah.
There are teeth marks and you just see the bottom half of his head. And then then there's a point where he hits one of these ghoulish adults and a box of cookies pops out and he's like, "Ooh, cookies." And he bites into the cookies and they have worms in them. It turns him into a zombie and he walks around like a zombie. It's just it's everything. It's such a fun, like, we are going to throw every gross idea we came up with. Like, there's a scene in the dentist's office. There's a bit where you have to literally go through like a diseased looking human mouth.
Yeah. And you have to crack apart the really rotten teeth in order to make room to continue going.
But I will tell you the thing that, simultaneously disturbed and impressed me the most in the whole game is there's a bit in the school level where he essentially miniaturizes and goes inside a locker, and there's a bunch of just like locker refuse in there, but there's one of those paper fortune teller things in there, and it spins, and every time it opens, each corner opening reveals a different monster that he has to fight, and they're like stop motion. Like it's like a claymation thing in the middle of this otherwise like 2D animated world, and he has to fight like a skeleton that's sort of made of like paper plates and straws.
What the hell? Yeah.
And I've talked about this a lot on the show. I know listeners who are regulars will know this, but like I was not allowed to do horror stuff as a kid. I would have been 11 when this game came out. So that probably was part of the reason that I was not aware of it. But like, if I had seen this, maybe not at age 11, I might have been okay with it at age 11. But if I had been like a 7 or 8 year old and seen that, I would have lost my mind.
Yeah, let me tell you. Yeah, it's interesting because I was young enough that a lot of now that I'm thinking about this, a lot of horror experiences were things that I experienced first through that game. Like there's a giant beast that is stuck in the wall in the attic level, and just its head is showing through. And if you whack her with your yo-yo, she will tell you a classic urban legend. And so she was the first one who told me the like hook in the door handle. You know, a couple is, and I'm sure they didn't say making out because it's a kid's game, but a couple is like parked on Lover's Lane, and you know the hook hand and the door handle, that classic old gag. Yeah, she was the first one who ever told me that story, and so without any knowledge of like, oh, this is a zeitgeisty kind of popular urban legend or whatever, just as a 7 or 8 year old, I was like, sorry, what are you talking about? And I think she's got like 3 of them that she kind of cycles through. But there are a lot of things like that I experienced for the first time in this game. A quote that I always think of, there's like 2 like Siamese twin boys who are juggling like keys, and so you have to hit them to get the exact key that you need, and they kind of over and over again are like, the key, who's got the key? And so anytime I lose my keys or whatever, that always runs through my head. um but and parts of it are really like kind of fun and goofy, like in the school level too. You're zapped into this chalkboard, and the entire time you're trying to make your way out of the chalkboard, this teacher is singing a song. It's like, that's a really goofy bit. But I think what makes it feel especially scary too is that you are utterly alone for the entire game. That it's just Ned wandering from liminal space to liminal space, and that as a 7-year-old, as like an only child who spent a lot of time alone anyway, that was a terrifying concept.
I just remembered another like thing that I have to mention in the school level is there's a bit in the school level where he wanders into the principal's office, or he ends up in the, and it's like he has to call his parents. Like the principal wants him. I forget what the mini game is there, but
connecting wires or something so that you can use the telephone.
Yeah, it's like he has to hit buttons and make connections so that the principal can call his parents. But the way that it's set up is Ned is this tiny little figure in the foreground, and then there's a gigantic desk that looks like it's 50 feet tall, and the principal is basically just this grinning head that's over the top. And the principal is not drawn in an especially scary way. He's not drawn like a monster. He looks like a Fairly Odd Parents character or something like that.
Totally.
But he has this big grin. And if you mess up in the midst of that level, he starts laughing. And I was like I said, I watched a playthrough when we were first going to do this a while back and we had to reschedule. And I went back and watched another one last night to prep for this. And I was awake by myself. My wife and child were asleep. I'm in my living room watching this playthrough. And that dude started laughing. And I was like, I'm fast forwarding through this. I cannot hear this. I cannot hear this dude laugh anymore because it's going to haunt my nightmares. But you brought up something interesting. And this is something that I am fascinated with. We've talked a lot about on this show. You were an only child, and this was one of your first like exposures to a lot of different horror elements. Mm-hmm. Were you like a scaredy cat kid? Did you crave horror? Did you love it? How did you react to things like this?
I mean, yeah, I feel like you already kind of know the answer, right? Because everyone says yes. I mean, most people say yes. And I wonder, like, what is up with that? What is up with the scaredy cat kids who find courage or agency or something through really creepy shit and then end up being like the creepiest people? Like I saw the Until Dawn movie the other day, and it was fun. You know, listeners, I would recommend it. It's like a middle of the road kind of good time. It's really, really fun, and then about halfway through, it gives you this exposition dump that doesn't make any sense. And you're like, wait a minute, I still have questions. And the movie like keeps going anyway. So it's like, but you know, speaking of video game adaptations or whatever, but the kills are really fun. And even the parts that are really creepy, like I'm at a point now where I'm just laughing, right? Even the really creepy shit happens and I'm like, oh man, that sucks for you, character. And there was like a 10-year-old girl behind me who had come with her mom, and I was sort of like, okay. But she was laughing at the exact same stuff I was, and like as hard as I was laughing. And a couple times I was like turning around to be like, who is this girl? Because I was kind of like, there's hope for the future. The next generation of horror fans is going strong. But yeah, I was really like, and it's funny because now I'm in my early 30s, and some of those anxieties are starting to bubble up again. I think like you go through your 20s and you're like, I'm indestructible, baby. I don't get hangovers. I can walk through parks at dark, you know? And now all of a sudden those like 7-year-old fears are starting to crop up again. because I'm realizing how fragile my body actually is now that I can like sneeze weird and throw out my back, you know. So I like it's just like the inside. The main thing for me has always been like kind of a panicky like claustrophobia in public spaces. Like I always get this like, I'm not currently nauseous, but what if I became nauseous and I had to throw up and I couldn't easily throw up? And so like even to this day, still kind of get that where I'm like in a movie theater or whatever, and I'm like, I have to remind myself that I don't feel nauseous because I just get the anxiety about like, well, what if I did? Like that was huge for me as a 7, 8-year-old, those kinds of feelings. And so I don't know what it is about game, because maybe like, I don't know. And I'd be curious to hear like your answer and other people's answers. Is it just because like your brain is in that zone? And so when you're experiencing something creepy, like you're playing a scary video game, or you're watching a scary thing, or you're reading Goosebumps or whatever, it's like soothing that part of you, like tonguing the wound or something. Like
I think that's part of it. I mean, the simplest answer, and this is reflected in something that happens in Nightmare Ned, which is at the, like you said, at everything he's fighting, all of these monsters that are avatars for his main fears. By the end, they are revealed to be like harmless things that he was overinflating. Like the graveyard one is actually really sweet because
oh yeah,
he gets to the end of the graveyard one and he's fighting this like Grim Reaper looking ghost, and he defeats it and it turns into his grandfather. And you basically get the implication of like his grandfather died and he had to go to his grandfather's funeral and he had to go to the gravesite, and that made him scared of the graveyard and by extension death. And his grandfather basically tells him at the end like, it's okay, I'm doing fine, don't worry about me. And that's actually like a really really sweet emotionally satisfying thing. And I do think it gets said a lot that those of us who are like, I'm on like 3 or 4 different kinds of anxiety medication at this point.
Yeah, I got a beta blocker working through me as we speak.
Oh man, you know. Yeah. Beta blocker bros right here. Yep.
Beta bros.
Beta blocker bros, everybody. But it's part of it is I think that stories have rules and conclusions, and if you're scared of something and then you see a story about that thing and you see it like tied up in a neat little bow, like it's helpful if you're a scaredy cat to know like, oh no, like where if there's a werewolf around, all you need, if you get a silver bullet, then you're good, you got the werewolf, you're gonna win.
Yeah,
vampires, crosses, and garlic, like there are ways around this. You don't have to be scared all the time. We're going to show you how to deal with these things. And, you know, Mike Flanagan talks about just enduring something scary, just sitting through like a really scary movie. If you sit through it and then the credits roll, your brain rewards you and you feel a little bit braver. So I think that's a very sort of simplified thing. I also think that one of the reasons I was in Nightmare Ned was interesting for me for this reason. When I was very little, I was not allowed near horror stories, and it created this state in my mind where every taste of horror that I got, every little, whether it was just like a scary moment in a Disney movie or a horror movie that was like on in someone else's house or the horror section at the video store.
Oh yeah.
My brain would build that shit into something way more extreme than whatever it actually was. And so that was this main source of my scaredy catness, was like my brain inflating these things. Like I'll tell a very brief version of the first time I ever went to a movie theater.
Oh,
I was 4, and my parents were taking me to see The Little Mermaid, and my dad kept telling me that I needed to be prepared because movies are loud. He was trying to prepare me. He was saying, like, it's going to be loud. It will be louder than it is when we watch movies at home. You just have to understand that it's not bad or anything, but it will be loud. And I remember sitting in this theater waiting for the movie to start, and my dad again said, "Hey, so it'll be loud, but it's okay. I'm right here." And my brain is just like, how loud are we talking? What is he warning me about that's so scary that it's going to be that loud? And that thing happened that happens less now, but it happened a lot back in the older day, back pre-digital days of movie theaters, where the previews started and the sound mix was like too loud. So, you used to go into movies and the previews would start and there was like 5 seconds of super loud noise and then it would adjust. So that happened, and my parents had to carry me out of that movie theater. I was so immediately scared by just a little bit of random like fanfare from the previews or whatever it was.
Yeah. This resonates so much. I'm really happy that you're saying this because I was exactly the same. I like remember having to leave so many movies and kind of just waiting out in the lobby for a little while, like until it died down. Like I did that with the Pokemon movie when oh shit, Pokemon nerds are going to be mad. Mewtwo, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot Mewtwo's name. All my Pokemon nerd friends are like, I remember having to leave the theater for that one, especially like when Phantom Menace came out, because it was such an exciting release. They cranked the volume on that, and so every blaster, the lightsabers crashing into each other was so loud. And so that was a huge thing for me as well, as having to leave the movie theater. I remember leaving the movie theater many times, at many different movie theaters. And then also it really resonates what you're saying about things concluding, that a story concludes. Because one thing I've been thinking about lately, as I think about every year, because I get this like reverse seasonal effectiveness disorder. When it gets dark earlier, I get so excited. I feel productive. I feel really nice.
Absolutely. Yes.
You know.
I was just on Blue Sky the other day because this week we had our first 100-degree day here in Texas. And
you're in Texas. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. So I was telling everybody, like, everyone gets seasonal affective disorder when it gets dark and cold. I get the opposite. I love when it gets when we hit fall back and it gets dark at 5:30 and it's cool out. Oh, that's my time.
Yeah, the best. Like last night, I've been really, really busy, and so last night I carved out some time where I was like, I'm just gonna sit down tonight and play video games. I don't play video games really anymore because I don't have the time. And but it was still light out at like 7:30, and I was like, well, now I feel like I have to be doing something or whatever because it's light out, and I wish that it was a colder season so that I could just be like, well, it's dark, I have to veg, But I do feel like a part of that is because I grew up, my dad was a professor for my whole childhood. And so, and I think just going to school myself too, like you get that kind of like fall is a time of beginnings and spring is a time of endings. And now that I'm a teacher, it still feels that way. Like now I'm like, tomorrow is my last day of the semester, so I'm like dragging myself through. And you just get kind of wistful, and I get that feeling that like, and this is why the things conclude in film resonates so well, because the kind of depressed feeling I get is like, I just want to drive off into the credits, like when the credits roll, you're like, okay, those characters are going to be okay. Or like, there's some kind of resolution, even if the characters aren't okay. There's just something that wraps it up well enough that the credits can roll. And I could also be like, old man yells at sky and be like, movies don't do that as much anymore because now it's all like, well, we got to tease the sequel and build the IP and whatever. But when the first couple warm days hit, like last week was our first couple of really warm days in New York. I just get that like man, I just want to drive off. I just want to like, not like drive off a cliff or like whatever, but I just want to like drive off and like play a song and like be okay forever and have the knowledge that I'll be okay forever because the credits are rolling, you know? So, I do think that film, or any media, book, film, video games, an album, whatever, gives you that sense that like you're going to be okay. You're going to drive off into the credits or whatever. So yeah, that just really resonates.
I want to bring this back to Nightmare Ned real quick before we wrap up here, because one thing that I noticed, it's always fun to look at these things for this show because I start thinking about them in relation to the person who chose them. So I'm looking at Nightmare Ned, knowing what I know about your work, and it's one of those horror stories that sort of becomes about all horror stories because it is about like a little kid's fears, and so you get zombies and monsters and scary adults and weird the idea that you're a very tiny thing in a very gigantic space, and loneliness. Like loneliness is a big part of it because and I was struck by how sort of sad Ned looks at the very beginning before he realizes he can play video games and eat snacks all night. When there's a note from his mom on the fridge that says like, "Hey, I had to go pick up your dad from work and I took your baby sister with me, but we'll be home later." And he just has this look of like, everyone just left me. Yeah. Like they didn't think I would want to go too. They just left me. So,
and his little sister like reaches out of the note too and like sticks a lollipop on him or something.
Yeah, there's a picture of her on the fridge and she smacks him with a lollipop. The picture does. Yeah. So there's that, and your books so far, by virtue of creating Renfield County and everything it contains, you are able to work all sorts of creatures and strange phenomena and scary humans and loneliness and all of these other things into a single narrative in the case of Edenville, but in the case of The Poorly Made, a single narrative told through a bunch of smaller narratives. Do you credit Nightmare Ned with that sensibility at all?
Absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of stories like Nightmare Ned that I credit with the ability to play with subgenre, and I think you're talking about like 90s properties. X-Files was a huge inspiration in the same way because X-Files would often give you a narrative that was unique and without rules. Like sometimes, and they would make it clear, like Mulder would be like, this week it's werewolves, and so we got to talk about the rules for werewolves. But then sometimes it'd be like, this dude is crawling through escalators. How does he do that? And so I like that feeling too, that it's something kind of unique and anti-tropic. And there's a story like that in The Poorly Made, where this kid realizes like, okay, I'm up against something clearly supernatural. It doesn't fit into any of the boxes that I recognize. So let me do a little research and see what I can come up with, and still like doesn't know how to defeat this thing. And I think that is a very like strong kid feeling too. And Nightmare Ned certainly falls into that category of like, there are all these weird things that kind of elude understanding and you don't know how to deal with them. And they're very scary. And they have their own sets of rules, you know, because there aren't a lot of like tropey things in Nightmare Ned. Now that I think about it, there are a lot of like recognizable elements, but there are a lot of things that play by their own rules. And like, in general, I just like a menagerie. I like a large collection of creatures. I've always been drawn to like those sort of like collage artworks where they throw all the Goosebumps covers together, and it's like all these things could exist in the same suburb, you know? So things like that, you know, I just love a variety of stuff. And so, yeah, Nightmare Ned for sure. Like I said, I would also credit X-Files or like, I don't know. In a different way, Invader Zim was another big inspiration because
Oh,
that was
yeah,
another
yeah.
one that like should not have been for kids. Like the one, and again, stealing organs, the one where Zim like kind of realizes like, oh well, in order to seem human, I need to have internal organs. So steals as many internal organs as he possibly can and replaces them with random things. So he like zaps out a girl's kidneys or something and replaces it with a radiator. So she just has like a radiator, which like is so, as an adult, you're like, oh, that's goofy. But as a 7-year-old, you're just like, what? And so, you know, things like that, I think are all of a piece. Anything that felt like it had its own set of rules that you could kind of play with and expand upon exponentially. And so that's what I want Renfield to feel like, that it has its own sort of set of unique rules, but within that there are new rules, the rules that would be new to us, you know, new tropes and new things and monsters that feel unique, and things like that. So.
Well, the most recent book is The Poorly Made and Other Things. It is out now. Galloway's Gospel will be out in September. I know you'll be promoting that coming up. So, Sam, before we let you go, will you let everyone know where they can find you online?
Yeah, I am the most active on Instagram. I am RebelSam94. And I am also on Blue Sky a little bit. I don't know what the Blue Sky, it's like at bluesky.social.rebelsam. Listen, there are so few Sam Rebeleins out there. If you Google Sam Rebelein, it's going to be so easy to find me. But Instagram is the one that I'm most active on. So check that out. We've got a couple fun announcements coming up on there. So stay tuned, everybody.
Our guest has been Sam Rebelein. Sam, it was great to talk to you. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you, man. This was so much fun.
Thanks so much to Sam Rebelein for being on the show. The Poorly Made and Other Things is out now. I highly recommend it. His next book, Galloway's Gospel, will be in stores this September, so be on the lookout for that. Great talking to Sam. Y'all should go find him on socials, give him all the support. And if you would like to follow us on socials, we are mostly on Blue Sky. We are at scareshapedus.bsky.social over there. If you want to follow us for giveaways and announcements of new guests and all the other stuff we have going on, you can also find us on Facebook. We're the Scares That Shaped Us over there. And if you prefer to listen to your podcasts on YouTube, you can find us over there as well. Just search The Scares That Shaped Us. You can also email me. I am scares@gmail.com. If you have a question, if you have something you'd like to hear me discuss on the show, I'd like to get a little bit of a mailbag going over here. So if you have questions you want me to answer on air, I'm happy to do that. Or if you just have an author that you think would be cool for us to bring on the show, I'm always happy to hear from everybody. Appreciate your emails. If you like what we do here, please consider telling your friends. We're trying to keep this thing growing so we can do more and more cool stuff with it. And please head over to the podcasting app of your choice. Make sure you're subscribed to us and leave us a 5-star review on that app. That helps us get featured, which helps us get more listeners, which helps us keep doing all the cool stuff we are doing. That's going to do it for us this week, everybody. We will have a new episode next week, but unfortunately, I can't tell you who the guest will be yet. There are a couple of scheduling things up in the air, but as soon as I know, you will know. So keep an eye on our Blue Sky account to find out who will be on the show next week. But I promise, June 11th, there will be a new episode of The Scares That Shaped Us. That's it for us this week. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. I'm Matthew Jackson, and this is The Scares That Shaped Us.